What is up, ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. We've got a special treat for you today. With all the Skyrim content uploaded to our channel over the past few months, we thought we'd change it up with a Fallout 4 build. This build is one of our most unique ones to date. It'll require a good imagination and some specialized role-playing, but if you can do that, this build will totally change your experience in the Commonwealth. This is the Junkie, and the Junkie, believe it or not, loves drugs. But after severe addiction to just about everything, he will end up leaving most of them behind and just using Jet. He will suffer withdrawal effects from the drugs he no longer takes, and this will boost the damage of his gun and melee weapon, as we're going to farm the Junkie legendary effect for them. So the guy will be addicted to all things and will suffer from the withdrawal effects from all addiction-based chems in the game except for Jet, as he will commonly be using it. With the Junkie legendary effect, this will make you cause heaps more damage, 150% more damage to be exact, and this is on top of Commando, Big Leagues, Bloody Mess, and Lone Wanderer. You also won't be taking much damage because you have high endurance, strong power armor, and the damage reduction of Lone Wanderer, but you will take a huge hit to your special stats. This build counters that fairly well, so most of it won't matter. Just keep in mind that VAS is not plausible, nor is relying on luck. Our strength is kept high by using power armor to sustain ourselves, and our gun damage isn't reduced by special stats, so no worries there. You'll also be role-playing that this man has built himself a special set of power armor to sustain his life, so stay inside the suit as much as you possibly can. You will need to come out of it sometimes, and the Junkie can survive that, but do your best to not stay out of it for too long. Do not take a dick doll. Before we get started with the Junkie's backstory and basic values, don't forget that you can navigate throughout the video as you please by heading down to the description and following the timestamps we've provided. But with that said, let's jump straight into the Junkie's backstory and basic values. The Junkie was born in the suburbs of Boston and lived a relatively standard life. He was from a loving family, he had a healthy social life, and he got exemplary grades. For the most part, his youth was scarcely interesting enough to talk about. His story began to change towards the end of high school. The Junkie was a model student, loved by his teachers in the science fields. He especially enjoyed chemistry. But one afternoon in class, his friends eagerly approached him, trying to retain subtly despite their quite obvious excitement. His friends had scored drugs. The Junkie didn't bother to ask where or how, but like most people his age, he was keen to experiment. He believed himself too intelligent and savvy to get caught up in an addiction at this part of his life. And this in fact was the case. He dabbled here and there, making positive memories with his close circle of friends, and then he returned to life as usual, with a plethora of new experiences. When school came to a close, the Junkie applied to a number of prestigious universities, but after a few rejection letters, he thought he would rather try again in the future than settle for a less renowned school. His friends were following a more traditional route, joining the army, and so feeling patriotic and like he can truly offer something to his country, the Junkie enlisted in the military service. The following few months of training were some of the best of the Junkie's life. He was in peak physical shape and he was constantly in the presence of good friends. The romance of the service soon turned sour, however, when the Junkie was separated from most of the people he knew and deployed on the front lines. To this, the Junkie had immense trouble delving into this part of his brain which stores these memories. When he first experienced the war zone, his thoughts on military service were ruined. The Junkie was overwhelmed with anxiety. His body shook each time the furious wail of gunfire hit his ears. It felt like no matter where he stood, sat, or lay, he was mere moments from death. As those in the military must do, the Junkie persevered through the torment. He rose to his duty and did exactly what was expected of him, and was thankful to emerge from it with his life intact. The gratitude for each breath soon faded, and by the time his service drew to a close, the Junkie was suffering from severe anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. When he returned to Boston, he found himself turning away from his old positive habits and slipping into the comfort of disassociation. He found a supply of drugs, and whenever the fleeting sound of war rose up from the depths of his memory, he took a hit and his fear subsided, replaced by temporary contentment. Surprisingly, this coping mechanism wasn't the solution, and the Junkie conjured up the remainder of his free will to force himself into rehab. He spent the next few months sober, tackling his stress with nothing to help him. The sleepless nights became just a part of his life during this time. The deep dark bag eyes were a permanent fixture on his once untroubled youthful face. Despite his dire circumstances, the Junkie found a light in the darkness. A beautiful woman named Nora volunteered at the rehabilitation facility, and she took a liking to the Junkie, and God only knows why, considering his current state. She provided the motivation the junkie needed to transition back into a normal existence. He cleaned himself up, found a bearable job to help keep his mind occupied and his bills paid, and even began attending Veterans Hall meetings to face his troubled past head-on in the company of others like him. Settling with Nora in Sanctuary Hills was the nicest of all these things and provided him with the biggest reason to be a better person. It truly seems like the junkie had taken the reins back on his life and would be a genuinely good father to their newborn child, Sean. That was, of course, until the bombs dropped. When the junkie awakes from his cryosleep to the sight of his murdered wife and missing child, he is rammed and battered by dark thoughts. The stillness in his wife's dead eyes evoked 100 faces from the depths of his psyche. All the men he'd watched die in the war. Only this was much worse. This was his one saving grace, the woman who had dragged him from the moors of his own twisted mind and given him a reason to live. Without her, he had nothing. Instinctively, the junkie turned to the only thing that could dull the pain he felt. The junkie turned to drugs and let the numbness of addiction take him. He will seek out all the drugs the post-war has left, and he'll develop an addiction to every last one of them. This is where some role-playing comes in, and if you do this right, the junkie will offer a totally fresh way to experience Fallout 4. Using his intelligence, which despite all he has been through still resides somewhere in his brain, the junkie modifies a suit of power armor to function as a life support system that will help keep his body alive as he continues to indulge in his deadly drug addictions. So with this as headcanon, the junkie will only be able to spend limited amount of times outside of his suit. Even within the confines of his suit, the junkie will still use Jet, his personal favorite drug, for the combat effectiveness it gives him. But he'll still remain addicted to all drugs and will suffer withdrawal effects. Another part of the role-playing will be that the junkie is actually immune to the effects of Addictol. Of course, for you, that means you shouldn't take it, as we aren't going to ask you to actually change the code of the game. The junkie's addiction to drugs goes far deeper than simply the chemicals, so Addictol really wouldn't help someone like the junkie. As far as the storyline goes, the junkie will seek out Sean. Whether just for closure or potentially the chance to reconnect with a loved one, he isn't sure. But he will relish being grounded by one overall goal. Unfortunately, even after finding Sean, his addiction is far too powerful to ever be rehabilitated, and he won't look for help from the Institute doctors. He will always be chasing a high, to the point where the petty squabbles of Fallout 4's factions won't interest him. He will side with the Institute purely for his son's sake, and he genuinely couldn't care less about the other causes. At the start of the game, the junkie's special stats will be 3 strength, 1 perception, 9 endurance, 3 charisma, 10 intelligence, 1 agility, and 1 luck. The special book in Sean's room will go into agility to give access to the commando perk. So with the stats mentioned, these are the essential perks for the junkie. Rather than telling you the exact order to take the perks in, we've decided that it's just better to provide you with a guide and let you pick the perks you value more first. But in order to keep the role-playing and playstyle the way it's intended for the junkie, we'll be highlighting the priority perks which affect the junkie's playstyle most significantly. While strength was never the junkie's biggest selling point, he does have what it takes to survive on the front lines, and he does know how to handle a weapon. From this skill line, the priority perk is Big Leagues. One of the junkie's primary weapons is a modified sledgehammer, so this perk is a must-have to make sure it packs one hell of a wallop. At max rank, this perk makes melee weapons do double damage. It also has a chance to cripple or disarm an opponent, it hits all targets in front of you, and you can even grand slam their head clean off. Also from the strength stat line, Armorer and Blacksmith, which is available after acquiring the Bobblehead, will give you access to all the armor and melee weapon mods you might need. Next up, we have Charisma. Similar to Strength, you won't have much invested in this stat, but there you will be able to take the junkie's second priority perk, Lone Wanderer. You'll want to drop 3 perk points into this, ignoring the 4th. With this perk, traveling without a companion will increase your carry capacity by 100, it will allow you to take 30% less damage, and it will let you do 25% more damage. When he's not held by the clutches of crippling addiction, the junkie is an intelligent man and is very knowledgeable of the sciences. For that reason, you'll be taking a few perks from this tree. 2 out of 4 perk points into Medic will help you stay alive and get more from your stim packs. Gun Nut and Science will allow you to put all the gun and high-tech mods on your weapons and armor, and Scrapper will help you get the most out of all the junk you obtain in your travels. The 2 priority perks from this tree are Chemist and Nuclear Physicist. With Chemist, chems will last an additional 200% longer, so you can tell why the junkie is quite fond of this perk. And with Nuclear Physicist, radiation weapons will deal double damage, fusion cores will last twice as long, and you'll have the ability to launch your fusion cores from from your armor to set off a devastating explosion. As the Junkie will spend most of his time in power armor, the latter two perk effects are extremely important. Once you get that agility point from the special book, you'll have access to the Junkie's next priority perk. This is Commando. It hardly needs to be explained that this war veteran knows how to handle a gun, and this fundamental survival skill will be put to good use in the wasteland. Maxed out, this perk will let your automatic weapons dish out twice as much damage, hitting targets may also stagger them, and you'll have significantly improved hipfire accuracy. That's all the priority perks out of the way, but there were a few more perks to take, and all of these come from the luck stat line. We suggest dropping 1 perk point into the base stat, bringing it up to 3 after the bobblehead, and then you'll have access to Scrounger and Bloody Mess. Bloody Mess provides a handy 15% damage boost across the board and adds some quite pleasing visceral visuals, and Scrounger will increase the amount of ammo you find in containers, which depending on how trigger happy you like to be, can be really helpful. Not including gear, but including all the bobbleheads, the Junkie's endgame special stats will be 4 strength, 2 perception, 10 endurance, 4 charisma, 11 intelligence, 3 agility, and 3 luck. Keep in mind that all of these stats will be diminished somewhat by all of your withdrawals, but it's well worth it for the damage boosts. It won't affect the playstyle too drastically. As for gear, during the early game, you'll want to get your hands on whatever power armor you can. The Junkie will always be able to add his life-saving technology to future suits. You should then search for any automatic rifles and melee weapons similar to the endgame equivalents. The final build will include the handmade rifle from the Nuka-Well DLC with a quick eject drum magazine and a large serrated bayonet. You will want to have it painted with the rainbow pack design also seen in the Nuka-Well DLC. The other weapon will be the heavy, shocking, sharp rocket mod on a sledgehammer. This will also be painted in the same rainbow design. It's got a bit of a Drago feel to it. The endgame power armor will be a full set of Exo 1 power armor, as not only is it one of the best in the game, but it really shows off the whole life support role-playing aesthetic. Use the Flames mod for the look, which you can put on all the power armor suits you use throughout your playthrough. Top it all off with a blue headlamp because it just looks awesome. The power armor mod for the head will be internal database to increase your intelligence and help negate the withdrawal effects. On the legs, get optimized servos to reduce AP sprint cost, and for the chest, get the reactive plates in order to reflect 50% of melee damage back on the attacker. The jetpack isn't really necessary for this build, and under the suit we suggest wearing tattered rags to fit in with the Junkie vibe. Lastly, don't forget to carry plenty of jet around with you. The Junkie won't be travelling with any companions for the most part, as the Lone Wanderer perk takes priority, but you can potentially take Kate with you at some points, but completing her story may not be favourable for the Junkie. The Junkie won't really be building settlements either, but you'll probably want spots around the place for storing power armor suits, resources, and obviously drugs. You can use a chem station for brewing chems and the repair stations for your armor suits. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. We've had a lot of fun hopping back into a Fallout build, so if you want to see more of it, show us your support. This was the Junkie, our super high damage build. In the description you can find links to all of our social media profiles and timestamps for all the video navigation needs. As always, thanks so much for watching guys. I'm Scott and I'll see you in the next one.